Did Michael Dougherty ruin the MonsterVerse? A question I've seen and a discussion I've had with plenty of Godzilla fans on YouTube and across social media platforms who weren't particularly satisfied with the third entry of the MonsterVerse, King of the Monsters. While a lot of fans enjoyed the movie, many can't help but wonder if Michael Dougherty's vision for the MonsterVerse clashes with the tone and aesthetic that Gareth Edwards created in his movie, Godzilla 2014. Some people would have liked to have seen what Gareth Edwards' Godzilla trilogy would have looked like had he stayed to direct the trilogy he planned on making. So today we'll discuss whether Michael Dougherty destroyed the MonsterVerse or not, and how I think it could have been done better. Before we begin, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the director Michael Dougherty, whom I find very interesting in his filmography. He's known for his two indie horror films, Trick or Treat and Krampus. Based on his horror films that he's directed, he has a very clear passion for monster movies, and his enthusiasm and love for the Godzilla franchise really shows in Godzilla King of the Monsters. Thanks to various interviews and podcasts, it's very clear that Michael Dougherty is a Godzilla fan. He genuinely likes Godzilla. He genuinely has a love and affection for the franchise and even the kaiju genre as a whole. And you can tell that. You can see that and feel that when you watch Godzilla King of the Monsters. As Godzilla fans, I think we can all agree that Godzilla King of the Monsters is a Godzilla movie made by a Godzilla fan and for Godzilla fans. We got to see Michael Dougherty, a Godzilla fan like any of us, fulfill his lifelong dream of creating the Godzilla movie he always wanted. One that shares our love and affection for the Big G through Easter eggs, homages, subtle, references, and loads of fan service. However, is that really what a movie like this needs to succeed financially and critically, not to mention be a good movie overall? Released on May 31st, 2019, King of the Monsters quickly became a divisive entry in the Godzilla franchise. Critics trashed the film, unjustifiably so. General audiences actually enjoyed the movie quite a lot, but they seem to have forgotten the movie afterwards. Godzilla fans, on the other hand, loved the movie, at least at the time. They gave praise to its faithfulness to the source material, great visual effects, action set pieces, musical score by Bear McCreary, and loads of fan service and nostalgic callbacks. The fan praise can be attributed to Michael Dougherty's direction and his choices to include a lot of fan service, homages, Easter eggs, and nostalgic callbacks to the Godzilla franchise, as he himself shares the same enthusiasm and love for Godzilla as all Godzilla fans do. So it's only natural that Godzilla fans would love a movie that was made by a Godzilla fan and for Godzilla fans, as they got to see a lot of the things that they wanted from that the other movie did not have, and they got to see a Godzilla fan direct the movie and give them exactly what they wanted. The same, however, can't be said about the film's box office performance, which opened with a domestic $47 million on opening weekend. Compare that to the $93 million that its predecessor made back in 2014. Combine this with a theatrical run of only $385 million worldwide on a $170 to $200 million budget. It made less than the $529 million worldwide made by Godzilla 2014 and the $566 million made by Kong Skull Island back in 2017. I think it's safe to say that the movie didn't quite make as much money as we all thought it was going to make, and that this really put a lot of fans, myself included, worried about what the future of the MonsterVerse holds and what will come after Godzilla vs. Kong. It really depends on how much money and how critically successful it is. Adding to this came the dividing opinions between Godzilla fans on whether King of the Monsters is the best entry of the MonsterVerse, how does it compare to the other movies, why it didn't make a huge splash at the box office, and how Michael Dougherty's contributions affected the future of the MonsterVerse. And is Michael Dougherty himself responsible for the current state of the MonsterVerse and why G fans are so divided? I'm going to share my opinion on all this, and I'll let you decide for yourself. I want to hear what you guys think. I want to see different opinions. I want to see people discuss, and come here in the comment section of my video and see what you guys have to think of all this. So, now to the big talking point today. Did Michael Dougherty actually ruin the MonsterVerse? Right before I dive into this, I'm going to try to be as unbiased and as honest as possible. I know people in the fandom have very different opinions than me, and most probably won't agree with the thing I say, but that's okay. We're all entitled to our opinions. I myself have had plenty of arguments with people about this, but today, I just want you to hear me out as I give my honest and unique take on Michael Dougherty's stamp in the MonsterVerse. Accusing me and other fans who might agree as fake fans or haters is not insightful to anyone and will only make the discussion worse. So please, I ask you to be respectful about this whenever we talk about something like this. With that said, we shall begin. The way I see it, I wouldn't say he ruined the MonsterVerse, but rather he made King of the Monsters very much as a passion project that, for better and for worse, faithfully embraces the fantastical tone of the Showa Godzilla movies, which is Dougherty's favorite era as he grew up watching those Godzilla movies. As many of you may know already, King of the Monsters is a movie made specifically for the Godzilla fans, which explains why it didn't resonate with critics or the general audience, and is filled with a ton of Easter eggs, fan service, and callbacks to the other movies of the franchise. This is very much intentional, as he wanted to create something that was faithful to the spirit of the Toho Godzilla movies, something for the fans to enjoy, and to correct the wrongs made in the 2014 Gareth Edwards directed Godzilla film. Speaking of which, this brings me to compare just how different both Godzilla 2014 and Godzilla King of the Monsters are, as I talk about the strengths and weaknesses of both films, what the two films have tried to accomplish, and lastly, how both could have potentially created their own trilogies. To make up for the 1998 disastrous Roland Emmerich Godzilla movie, Gareth Edwards wanted to make his Godzilla movie more in line with the classic Toho Godzilla movies, while also keeping it grounded in reality with a very dark and somber tone, closer to the 1954 original. Despite the movie not being as great or as somber and dark as the marketing and the 2012 SDCC teaser made it out to be, it still retained the dark and grounded in reality tone, the faithfulness of the character to Godzilla in terms of personality and its design, as well as being a critical and commercial success. Released 5 years after Godzilla 2014 and 2 years after Kong Skull Island, Michael Dougherty's Godzilla movie brought in a 2-hour action-packed extravaganza that encapsulated as much of the Godzilla franchise as possible, as well as being a natural continuation of the 2014 film. Taking over the spot of Gareth Edwards as he had to leave to direct Rogue One, a Star Wars story, Michael Dougherty's film embraces the fantastical and over-the-top Showa tone, and was more action-packed, fast-paced, exciting, and containing bigger and more epic monster fights that came at a consistent rate. Despite these adjustments not improving the film critically or financially, it still won over the fans, who generated a massive hype for this film a year before it came out. So now, where are the strengths and weaknesses of each movie, and how do the two visions collide? I'll start by saying that Michael Dougherty did an incredible job with what he was given. The best thing he's done with the MonsterVerse is that he expanded the mythology, lore, and world building with additional new kaiju named after mythological and folkloric beings, gave the kaiju more personality, and struck a right balance between faithfulness to the source material and upgrading them with new features in terms of their design. I've said this before and I'll say it again. A lot of Easter eggs, homages, references, and nods to previous Godzilla and kaiju movies is a nice touch by a director who's a huge Godzilla/kaiju fan, and it puts a smile on my face as it gives the movie a richer attention to detail and a nostalgic personality. Well, at least some of the fan service does. And that's where I have one of my biggest gripes with King of the Monsters, how self-indulgent it was, being more concerned with making something for the fans instead of making a movie that's accessible for both fans and non-fans. I also think that he threw out the realistic tone set up in both Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island. Just to land on that note real quick, I know there's a whole other argument that in of itself, whether or not realism is a thing in the MonsterVerse, or even in the Godzilla movies as a whole. I won't dwell on that here because this video is not about the realism, but a video like that will be made at some point. If I'm going to summarize that real quick, realism in a kaiju movie isn't about literal realism, but rather taking something that's wildly fantastical like the kaiju and putting them in a story or a world where the sheer weight and size of the kaiju is emphasized. The story frames the kaiju like a real-world event and designs them in a way that look like biologically plausible animals, even though realistically, of course, they can't exist, but they were designed to look realistic, to give the movie some believability and a sense of real-world horror. That's where I'd say the realism in Godzilla 2014, as well as other Godzilla movies, comes from. I never felt that when watching King of the Monsters, as the kaiju feel weightless at times, and don't emphasize on how large and how slow-moving they are, even though some scenes do, but for the most part, I was very disappointed that the sheer size and the presence of the kaiju don't feel there, like they don't really exist at all. And not to mention the lack of stakes at large. I never felt that the world was really under attack by giant monsters, and the characters themselves don't even seem to care about the Titan apocalypse. Compare this to Godzilla 2014. For all the problems it has of teasing the kaiju too much or having bland characters, it does at least have the sense of danger, the sense of real-world threat that the Mutos and Godzilla even possessed. Godzilla and the Mutos truly felt massive and move at a slow, lumbering pace. As you see something over 300 feet tall just towering over you, that just sends chills down your spine. As much as I praise the kaiju element and the slow build of Edwards' movie, I do have my fair share of criticisms with his movie. The movie's way too dark to see, though I think that's because of the Blu-ray transfer of the movie. It doesn't really focus on Godzilla until the last 30 minutes. Most of the plot revolves around the Mutos instead. The movie teases the action in way too much and cuts away at the last second, a little too much for its own good. Though it's edited a lot better than King of the Monsters. The killing off of Bryan Cranston's character before any real development happens was a huge mistake, as he was building up to be the most interesting character. And there's a sense that the movie could have been a lot better, and the trailers made it seem like it was a much darker, more somber movie than it actually was. And both movies fall victim to having underdeveloped characters and wasting the talents of really good actors. Though I'll say that King of the Monsters has characters that are more fun to watch, as they're actually part of the action, and get involved with the monster stuff. And the plot of King of the Monsters does revolve more around Godzilla. But King of the Monsters characters don't compare to Bryan Cranston's short-lived but emotionally powerful and compelling performance as a man stuck in the past who's lost everything and is determined to solve the mystery of what took away his former life. The final thing I want to say is that given the wildly different tone of King of the Monsters, it does feel like it's set in a completely different universe compared to what we saw in both Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island. To put this in perspective, imagine if the Dark Knight trilogy turned out to be a very different trilogy than what it is now, where instead of Christopher Nolan and the Dark Knight trilogy gang directing and making all three movies, some director who's a really big Batman DC fan makes The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises nostalgia-fueled love letters that retell classic Batman stories that embrace the source material and establishes the tone established in Batman Begins, and it doesn't even compare to those films in terms of how well they were made. Imagine if that's what we got instead of getting the trilogy we have now that was made under one director's vision of an overarching, grounded in reality take on Batman that emphasizes characters, plot, and themes, which makes it into one of the best superhero movie trilogies of all time. What I'm basically asking for is consistency. Have at least one director oversee all the MonsterVerse movies and stays with the tone and rules established in the first movie. This was the original plan for 2014's two sequels, where it was a trilogy of movies directed by Gareth Edwards, who would have given the time to develop the story and expand the world that he made in the first movie. This plan unfortunately never came to be, as Gareth Edwards had to leave the project and to direct Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and the rights to Kong were shifted from Universal, which was reworked into the Godzilla Gareth Edwards universe, which then created what is now the MonsterVerse. I'm not trying to slam and praise other directors' visions over the other. I'm simply pointing out that the differences in intent of each movie. Here's where you can see the differences between the two directors' visions and how they don't really quite fit in the same universe, as one director tried to make a Godzilla movie grounded in reality and aimed at general audiences, while the other did it for Godzilla fans and embraced the fantastical and over-the-top tone of the Showa Godzilla films. Here's where I think both visions can coexist without intertwining with each other. I think Godzilla 2014 could have worked better had its trilogy came to be, to flesh out the story and the characters and maintain the dark, serious tone to show that Godzilla can be taken seriously and appeal to the masses. Whereas King of the Monsters could have worked better as a standalone remake of the Showa era that shows a director's vision and love for the franchise made to please the fandom and himself. And people outside the fandom could have seen this film for what it's trying to be. So to draw a bit of a conclusion here and to kind of wrap things up, I have two different answers for this. On the one hand, speaking as a Godzilla fan, I think Michael Dougherty did an amazing job with what he was given, as he expanded the mythology of the MonsterVerse, added new titans, and gave more to the lore. And he embraced the tone of the Showa Godzilla movies, the era of Godzilla films that Michael Dougherty grew up with. In other words, he made the exact Godzilla movie that he wanted to make, all done with a passion, something that we as Godzilla fans can appreciate and admire. On the other hand, where I think he did mess up is with the consistency. By throwing out the realistic tone that was set up in both Godzilla 2014 and Kong Skull Island, it resulted in a movie that felt very different and didn't feel like it belonged in the same universe as those two films, as well as feeling more like a course correction after listening too closely to the criticisms of the previous films, to try to please every Godzilla fan out there. Finally, I think Michael Dougherty was too self-indulgent when making this movie, as he tried to make the best possible Godzilla movie by cramming every aspect of the Godzilla franchise into one movie, which results into a messy movie that lacks a coherent story, likable characters, and pacing editing that's done way too fast that it makes it difficult to really care about the characters or the story or even get engaged with the action, since it cuts away too much from the monsters. So where do I think they could have done better? Assuming the MonsterVerse doesn't end with Godzilla vs. Kong, I think it needs to work better on the human characters and on the story side of things. Even by Hollywood blockbuster standards, the human characters have been rather one-note, and aside from a few standout performances, the human characters have been rather uncompelling and thinly written, which is unfortunate because the actors behind these roles are truly talented people, and yet their talents are not being fully utilized to their full capacity. The characters don't have to be Shakespearean levels of complexity per se, but they need to be at least interesting enough and relatable enough by putting them into situations where we can see development and change to make us really care about them. The stories should also be more engaging and more interesting and not just be retellings of classic Godzilla stories that we've already seen before. And nostalgia alone is not enough to propel it to a great movie. Another aspect I think they should fix is with the action, the pacing, and the editing. Both Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters have made the mistake of setting it in barely seeable nighttime scenes, as well as cutting away from the monsters too much. Yes, I know this is technically nothing new for the Godzilla franchise, but at least in some of those Toho Godzilla movies, the action does focus on the kaiju, as well as being smoothly edited in a way that naturally cuts back and forth between the human and the kaiju scenes. Kong Skull Island, which is also set in the MonsterVerse, has demonstrated how action can be done in both daytime and nighttime scenes, as well as action that is well shot, choreographed, edited, and has time to at least make you care somewhat about the characters in the story, and top it off with some truly impressive and eye-candy shots of the monsters. If Godzilla vs. Kong can achieve all of that, I think we'll end up with a great action kaiju spectacle movie, as well as a pretty good movie overall that'll guarantee to make a lot of money at the box office and maybe continue the MonsterVerse going forward. Now, with all that said, it may sound like I hate King of the Monsters a lot, and I truly believe that Michael Dougherty destroyed the MonsterVerse for the sake of impressing a fandom who just wants more Godzilla. But the truth is that I don't hate the guy for making a divisive movie, and my feelings on the movie is a complicated love-hate relationship, as my opinions have changed wildly throughout the year. I absolutely respect and admire the guy and his intentions with his movie. Michael Dougherty is a great guy and a great Godzilla fan. He seems like an honest and genuinely nice guy who speaks enthusiastically about his work and genuinely cares about the film he makes, as he left his mark on the long-running franchise that shows no signs of stopping and made something that fans can admire and look upon with inspiration. And while his movie may have failed at being the summer blockbuster of 2019, as well as being a great movie overall, it succeeds in capturing the spirit of Godzilla and old-school kaiju entertainment through the lens of a unique vision and talent he made that seeks nothing more than to entertain the fans by embracing the fantastical roots of the Godzilla and kaiju genre, for better and for worse. In this day and age where entertainment is more political and drama is where the real entertainment is at, I'd rather take a messy but entertaining Godzilla movie made by people who are familiar with the franchise than a trilogy of movies that lack heart, a unique vision, are unnecessarily political behind the scenes, and were made by people who are more interested in the brand and not the actual franchise. I think that's something that every Godzilla fan, including me, can all agree on. So those were my thoughts. And what do you think? Do you think Michael Dougherty destroyed the MonsterVerse? Would you have liked to have seen Gareth Edwards' Godzilla trilogy had he returned to direct? What are your opinions on the King of the Monsters and the MonsterVerse as a whole? Let me know down in the comments, and feel free to subscribe to my channel for more content like this.